Hey out there. Hey, this is October 17th, 2015, and I'm in Northern California. And from the footage, you can see that Northern California is an acutely overpopulated area. Now, it just began to rain out here. I've got my camera covered a little bit, so hopefully I can protect it from getting drenched and ruined. But all we've been getting is just a tiny bit of rainfall here, and it's predicted it's going to run into the hundredths of an inch. So they weren't predicting too much today, and I'm going to try to wing it and see if this rain stops. And today I'm going to get into current events. I'm going to talk about the Alex Jones show. And I wanted to explain some economic principles in very basic terms, stuff I've gone over before, but maybe I can hone my communication skills and keep it more simple for people to really understand what I'm trying to convey and how logical and reasonable certain economic principles are. That's why they're called law, like a law of supply and demand. And the other thing I wanted to touch on was helping people to understand what I mean when I call the Chamber of Commerce a quasi-governmental chamber of communists. It's a fascist-based kind of thing, and people got to fundamentally understand that. We have to understand that business interests, collectively and individually, and employers, these are the masters of old, are a special interest group in their entirety. We need to keep that in mind. I was down in Santa Cruz recently, a couple weeks ago, and what used to be free parking lots in downtown Santa Cruz behind what they call the Pacific Avenue Mall. These, free parking lots, you could park for, I think, 3 or 4 hours there, and they chalk your tires, so if you stayed longer, you might get a ticket. But now it's gone to all these pay to park. And when I was down there paying the machine and getting my receipt, these guys working for the Chamber of, I thought they were working for the Chamber of Commerce. And I called and I said, "You guys working for the Chamber of Communists?" And, they were taken aback a little bit. And, as Americans, we all have to grow some skin. And, that's part of being an American, is this idea that we have free speech. It's such a beautiful thing. Yesterday I was at this tobacco store where I pick up my cigarettes, and I was talking to my Palestinian friend's sister. And man, this woman, she's a real fireball and a really hard-headed woman, and it was enjoyable to talk to her. But I mean, she is just full of fire, and she was very interesting, and she was contradicting some of the stuff my friend Muawiyah had told me, and it was interesting because she was conveying that of course Palestine is not that great a place, but Muawiyah told me that, even though he said there's no homelessness there because if you can't afford to buy a house, the government will help, and she was contradicting that. And so I don't know at this point what the whole truth about that is. So it's somewhere in between, likely. You've got capital interest in Palestine, I'm sure, just like you do in America, and they have an interest in money, the business interest, the interest of the employers, and those interests tend to conflict with egalitarian interests that might be involved in the theocracy, the idea that the Muslims have a lot more say-so in how their government is run, how these authorities, the governmental authorities, operate, what they can get away with and what they can't in regard to colluding with business interests. And so, it's really important to understand the big picture in all these affairs. So, about the Alex Jones show, this issue of minimum wage came up. They were covering the debates, and Bernie Sanders came on, and he came up with a dollar figure. He said $15 an hour, and while I find that objectionable, and really, if we just went back 50 years, and he's older than me, so he knows what the buying power of a dollar was 50 years ago, then the commensurate minimum wage in terms of, to have that same buying power of a dollar today, just 50 years ago in 1965, I believe minimum wage, you can look it up, was about $1.65 an hour, if I'm not mistaken. So in order to have the commensurate purchasing power of that $1.65, minimum wage today, because of the cost of living in the aggregate and the debasement of the currency through inflation, it would be somewhere around 25 bucks on average. In some locales, because the cost of living has gone up so much more than that, it would be even more. So your cost of living has gone up approximately 1,800% in the aggregate. In some arenas, in some commodities, it's gone down dramatically, and still in the aggregate, your inflation has increased about 1,800%, which translates to your currency having been debased to the tune of about 90% of its buying power just 50 years ago. Now, you see, the problem I have with people that object to minimum wage increases, I say, well, wait a minute. You're blaming the effect of market manipulation, the effect of price fixing and collusion. Okay, these business interests that say, it's in my interest to jack up the price of this commodity, and so here, come with me, collude with me, and we'll do it together because there's power in numbers. So, let's do this thing. And so they've successfully done it. They couldn't do it in a luxury arena, like automobiles or watches or any other trinkets or knickknacks, but they could do it in an essential human need arena. And this is what troubles me and so immensely. I cannot get okay with people not understanding these basic issues. So primarily, the cost of housing has been the driver for the inflation, and it's particularly happened in the last few decades. It's really ramped up, with Bill Clinton getting rid of the Glass-Steagall Act. It's really helped these interests to just rape the financial daylights out of the public. And so many of the public go along with it. I mean, God, people are so stupid. Help us, God, because they don't understand that high housing prices are not a good thing. They bought into it. Somehow it's benefiting them, and so they've gone along with it. But here in California now, we've reached the pinnacle, and now the majority of residents are renting, and they can see, well, high housing costs are not a good thing. Perhaps somebody that's renting says, well, my parents, they're landlords, and so shut up, I don't want to hear it because I'm going to inherit all those rental properties someday, and all is well, So that's the way I realize a lot of people's minds work, because they've been warped and twisted and perverted by the secular world system, this pitiable excuse for a reality that's been inflicted upon us all has messed up our minds. So, recently I left a comment on the Alex Jones Show, and I know he reads his comments, and I alluded to something like calling him an elitist blowhard for his stand on, making fun of Bernie Sanders and the minimum wage thing. But, and actually I kind of agree. It was a stupid thing for Sanders to say, come up with this dollar figure, and really it ought to be about 25 if we're going to, get down to brass tacks and be honest about this thing. That's where, just to have the same standard of living, the same purchasing power of a minimum wage job, it would have to be about that. And that's not hyperbole. That's matter of fact that can be calculated mathematically. So I'm not making anything up. I don't need to exaggerate it because it's that bad. And so, I say don't blame the effect. The effect is a cost of living adjustment to all this market manipulation. This is the only way to hold these forces in check. And at the time, get your eyes off the people that need the cost of living adjustment and put it on the people that cause the need for the cost of living adjustment, the colluders, the market manipulators, the price fixers. Blame the right cause. Make sure, stay focused, because this is what people are forgetting, that not everybody benefits when they manipulate markets. You might say, well, somehow it's been helping me, so just blame capitalism and just blame little, crony capitalism. Just sounds too innocent. It's a fitting term, really, for what's going on. But to me, we've got to go to what Gerald Celente describes it as, and other people. I believe Max Kaiser's called this, it's fascist. It really is. Whenever the government is colluding with private interests, that's a bad scene, man, because, then we've got the government working against the best interests of the people at large. And often these are the poor working class people. They allow things to get wrecked up by allowing the money printing class and all their minions thereof, witting and unwitting, to go along with this thing in the name of making more tax dollars. You see, that's the motivation why the governments go along with it. So by tolerating that, they are the ones that are justifying the need for a social welfare system. They're allowing the poverty to explode. They're allowing the demise of the middle class. They're allowing the wealth disparity, all these things to flourish. Okay, so somebody's got to pay. You understand? That's what needs to be understood. So you don't have to pay it. I'm not a tax and spend kind of guy. I don't prescribe to the Robin Hood philosophy. So if you don't feel good about paying your taxes, then be true to yourself, okay? And don't pay your taxes. That's your problem, what happens from there on out. I can't, everybody's got to fight their own battles here. But the point is that somebody's got to pay. And if you think it's immoral that you should have to pay, then speak up and say, well, if you had your way, how would the tax structure be? What exactly, specifically would you do? Well, I'd make it voluntary. I'd say, well, if we're going to make it mandatory for anybody, let's start with the billionaire class, because it's not even going to hurt them, okay? So that to me is logical and reasonable. But, in this day and age of, ubiquitous corruption, rampant corruption everywhere, that's a radical notion. Logic is a radical notion in this world. And, people wonder why everybody's nuts. You see it in the way they drive. You just see it in the way they their vibes, the way they talk, the way they behave, the way they act. Everybody's sucking lemons, they need a drug or a drink, or they need, this or that. They want to slit their wrists. They want to bury their head in the sand. Nobody watches the news anymore. They can't deal with it. They're so much in fear. This brings me to this interview that Alex did with Paul Craig Roberts. Paul Craig Roberts was an economic advisor during the Reagan administration. And while the idea of trickle-down economics was an abject failure for the most part, his intentions were good. That's the thing you got to understand about a noble, honorable, egalitarian economist like Paul Craig Roberts and all the other economists that I really pay any attention to. One thing they have in common is that they are egalitarian. They want the best interest for people. These are intelligent people, and truly intelligent people are on the side of good. They want good, not for a select, privileged, exclusive few, but they understand it's got to embrace the population at large, which of course is comprised of a lot of poor people, a lot of struggling, working poor, the working class, okay? Those are the ones we should be focused on. So much attention has been paid to the middle class, the middle class, the middle class. And it's just, it's wrong. It's like, you have a wound on your body and you say, well, here's a big fat, wound up here, that gaping wound that's hemorrhaging, and I got a little abrasion down here. So, let's put it on the abrasion. And, maybe that's going to, it's illogical. It's stupid. God, people are stupid. It's just ridiculous the way we've been trained, inculcated, indoctrinated, brainwashed to think somehow this system makes sense. I mean, we say, well, it's all, whatever the market will bear. And, if this career doesn't pay, you got to get into that career, this skill, that skill. I say, my God, we're paying all these sports players these, hundreds of millions of dollar contracts, baseball, football, basketball,